the Teaching Artists Institute to where we are today. It's my great pleasure to be here with you and to share with you a portion of my journey in terms of how I became a teaching artist. My name is Rufus Stevenson, and I see my sister Juliet in the audience there now. She's from Mali, and actually it was 40 years ago while serving as a diplomat, a U.S. diplomat in Mali, that I met the spirit of the ancestors, and I got on this journey to nurture and promote the cultural spirit of Africa in the diaspora, the 6th region. I'm from a very small town, country town in Georgia, about 40 miles southwest of Atlanta. There are 13 members in my family. I was the 9th child, the 7th son. And growing up, when relatives came from the north and elsewhere, home for the summer, they always asked, where is that 7th son? Where is that 7th son? So I grew up having relatives that point at me and said that he's the 7th son, he's going to be somebody, he's going to travel, he's going to see the world. There's a southern expression about a 7th son. It's supposed to be that special person, that number 7, and you were supposed to see the world, be educated and whatnot. So I realized I was coming from, my father was a sharecropper, and I realized that I was coming from a family that would not be able to afford to help me get college. But make a long story short, I was the first Morehouse graduate to join the Peace Corps, and I taught mathematics in Sierra Leone, West Africa. Wow. After West Africa, I studied in Germany for a year because when I was at Morehouse, my professor, my German professor, Frau Rufus, told me that, Herr Stevenson, you will never learn Dutch. You will never learn German. And coming from a country background, no one would tell me what I could never do. Yes. So once I finished my Peace Corps, my 2 years in Sierra Leone, I studied German at the Johannesburg University in Germany for a year, just to go home back to Morehouse and speak German with my German professor. And after I did, I never spoke German again. So after that, I was drafted after America gave me the Bible and sent me to Africa to teach. I came back, and instead of being deferred, like most Peace Corps volunteers who had served and were deferred, but I was drafted. Of course, I was very upset, and I went to Vietnam as a military policeman. I was in Vietnam almost a year in Vietnam, came back, got a Rockefeller grant, and did my graduate work at Harvard and at Kalamazoo College in Michigan, where I studied history, political science, and economics for a year, and that gave me the background, because I was a math major, philosophy at Morehouse, and gave me the background to attend and get my master's at the Johannesburg at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins, SAIS, where I had my master's. After that, I joined the State Department, and my first diplomatic post was in Madagascar. And after Madagascar, during Madagascar, I experienced the first student revolution while I was in Madagascar. Then my second assignment was back to Mali, back to West Africa. I had been to West Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer, but I knew something was coming at me, a spirit was coming after me after I went back to West Africa. So in Mali, publicity was all over the world. It was the first televised drought in Mali, and that was 40 years ago. And there I was in Mali, found myself in this rich, ancient civilization, people dying all around me because of the drought conditions. It was in Mauritania one night after we had taken, America sent 3 C-130 planes to Mali to transport these international grains throughout the Sahel. And I was in Mauritania in the workshop one afternoon when a Peace Corps volunteer introduced me to Sheikh Anta Diop. And I'd never heard of this man before. And I found out that Sheikh Anta Diop from Senegal, a renowned Egyptologist and scholar, he studied at the Sorbonne in Paris, and he had to write 3 books before they would accept, Sorbonne would accept his dissertation. And his last book was called The African Origin of Civilization. I read that book and it's changed my life. And as a result of that, one night coming back from one of the job trips, I was wondering what I was going to do with my life. And as a result of reflecting, I decided that I was going to harness the moment. And I was going to take advantage of my unique situation in this ancient civilization with death all around me and poverty, and yet people were so proud, you understand. So I decided I would play with my life. And so at that moment, I seduced myself into the African spirituality. And I decided that I would harness the moment and bring as much of Africa back to America as I could. And 40 years ago, there was no American Smithsonian African Museum. There was nothing here dealing with Africa. So I brought the kente cloth, I brought the statues, I brought all these things back to Washington. And I had no idea where I was going and what I was going to do with it. All I knew was that I was going to bring it back and I was going to dedicate my life as my mission to nurture and promote the cultural spirit of Africa in the diaspora, which is the 6th region now. So I brought everything back to America, and over the years, the spirit of the ancestors and God has led me to the heart of the Black community, which is the church. So for 11 years, when Kwanzaa became an official solstice step, I was chosen to dress the Millennium Stage at the Kennedy Center for the Spirit of Kwanzaa. And it was so well received until the Kennedy Center gave us the Grand Concert Hall stage for the next 10 consecutive years. So over those years, I took African textiles, red, black, green, the colors and whatnot in different patterns, and I dressed the Kennedy Center, and I dressed venues and whatnot. But about my 11th year at the Kennedy Center, I considered that was my coup d'etat, in the which that I decided that this year I'm going to fix these white folks. So that summer, I take tours to Africa, groups of people to Togo, Benin, and Ghana. And that year, I left the tour group and went to Mali, and I had woven a whole spool of red, a whole spool of green, black, and gold. And I did this mainly because it was going to be my coup d'etat on the Grand Concert Hall stage at the Kennedy Center. So after I dressed the stage, I was very frightened because I was thinking old school. When I was growing up, if you showed interest in those colors, red, black, and green, it meant that was Marcus Garvey. It means you loved Africa, you hated white folks, and all these things like that. It was a very militant thing. So here again, old school thinking, here I was, I said, I'm going to fix these people this time. So after I dressed the stage, I then took these spools of red, black, green, and gold, and if you've been to the Grand Concert Hall stage at the Kennedy Center, you'll see this is very tall. And so I got up there, and the Kennedy Center helpers, all union people at Kennedy Center, after they helped me decorate the stage, they had finally moved away from the stage for lunch and whatnot, and that was my time to really do my coup d'etat, to drop these colors. So I went up there and I dropped the red, I dropped the black, I dropped the green, and I dropped the gold. And I almost had a heart attack just going to the audience to find a seat. And I looked back at the stage, you understand, there it was. And my heart was jumping, old school, this is militant, you understand. Here I am doing this at the Kennedy Center. And then it dawned on me that, wow, there was no need for this kind of hard beating like that, because red, black, and green were the colors of Kwanzaa. So it's a psychological click and whatnot, you understand? So I want you all to know that as a teaching artist, you must use your creativity, your artistry ability to utilize your creativity as an artist to communicate with your people. With your people, you must use all your energy to create the communicate this knowledge, this creativity into the consciousness of your people. So over the years, as a result of dressing these venues, the churches, the banquet hall, the Grand Hyatt, and all these places. It finally came to me that in 2011, I went with Tony Browder to excavate the tomb of Karakamon in Luxor, Egypt. And that was Karakamon. I know we don't have a few minutes, so I want to make this very quick. In Luxor, Kim and I, that's why I met Kim. Kim and I, we were both part of the excavation team in 2011. It was only 3 months after the Egyptian revolution. And we were the only international excavation team in Egypt. And Kim and I were there. So one night, we lived our hostels right across the road, not the street. It was right across the road from the Colossals of Memnon. And these are three giant stone statues of Amenhotep III, who married Atiye, who was the daughter of Joseph in the Bible. And that night, there was nobody on the roof that night, and as I looked across the road to these giant statues, in the background was the Valley of the Kings. And I said, wow, the lights were on the statues, and it dawned on me that, wow, I came to Egypt mainly because I wanted to buy, my objective was to buy fabric from every country in Africa to make it holistic when I decorated venues. So that night, as I looked across the Valley of the Kings and where we excavated every day, and then the Castle of Memnon, it dawned on me that, wow, Egypt was the voice of Africa before Jesus' time as a Christian. And I said, wow, I definitely will go to Luxor tomorrow night and buy textiles that will represent Egypt, which was the voice of Africa before Jesus' time. It was Egypt and Kemet, as you know, but the Greeks called it Egypt, and that's why we, in the Eurocentric education, we have Egypt, but it was Kemet. So the next evening I went to Luxor with our guide, and I bought the lotus tapestry from Egypt. And this is the voice of Africa, Egypt, before Jesus' time. And the lotus represents the Upper Nile, which is Upper Egypt, which is going towards the Nile Valley civilizations of Ethiopia, Egypt, and the Sudan. So this was the lotus, and that was the voice of Africa before Jesus' time. And then it dawned on me that the voice after Jesus' time, during Jesus' time, was Ethiopia. Because that night I thought, I said, wow, I remember Herodotus said that the fall of Western civilization, he said that anything south of Cairo was Ethiopia. And I thought about the Queen of Sheba, my Lord, that was during Jesus' time. So here again, Egypt, Ethiopia was the second voice. That's the second voice. That was during Jesus' time with Ethiopia. And then I said, well, I think a couple of nights later, I sit up there, I was wondering, so it kept going, these revelations came to me. Then I said, well, what happened after Ethiopia? What happened after Jesus? I knew that 2,000 years went by, and Africa was divided up in the 1893 conference in Europe, with all the European powers divided Africa up. And I know that Africa was colonized by the European powers, and the first independent country that came out of all that was Ghana in 1957. So here again, that's the kitty claw. I had plenty of kitty claw, and that was the third voice, you understand. So I said, now what happened after the OAU, after Ghana? And I remember a few years later, Ghana was independent in 1957, and a few years later, in 1963, Nkrumah in Ghana, Sekou Touré in Guinea, and Modibo Keita in Mali, they came together in Ethiopia with Haile Selassie, and they all established the Organization of African Unity, so that when all the other African countries became independent, they would join it and would be one voice for Africa, and that was the OAU. And that's the white strip hand woven in Guinea, the white strip. So so far we got three now. We got four now. We have Egypt, which is Kemet, the voice of Africa before Jesus' time. During Jesus' time, we have Ethiopia. Then 2,000 years later, we have Ghana. And now we have the OAU, the Organization of African Unity. And I said, well, what happened after 1963? And we know that in 2002, the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, changed its name to the AU. So and that means the African Union. And I use the colors of Kwanzaa to represent the African Union as our input from the 6th region and whatnot. So now we have the 5 voices of Africa now from before Jesus' time to the present here. And this is my teaching as a teaching artist. This is my focus. Even this afternoon, I have to leave this afternoon and dress a church sanctuary at one of the big Baptist churches in Washington. This is my first time dressing that sanctuary. And wherever I dress a venue now, my focus now consists of the 5 voices of Africa. But yet, 3 weeks ago, I came back from Ethiopia. I was a presenter at the 3rd International Conference on Ethiopia, its Biblical, Historical, and Cultural Roots. And we traveled from here, we traveled to Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, and then we flew up to Lalibela, where you will find it is the Jerusalem of all Ethiopia, and that's where you will find those 11 UNESCO stone-carved churches in the ground. And then we flew from Lalibela, we flew to Aksum, which is where they say the Ark of the Covenant is located there. And during my stay in Ethiopia, I came forth with two other revelations, and that is, I thought I would add the gold, which I normally would say was the gold that was stolen from Africa. I now say it represents us in the 6th region, in the diaspora. And we were the gold that was stolen from Africa. Yeah. So this is the gold now, represents the us in the 6th region, the diaspora now. And then the seventh one, which I'll be putting at the church, but I have those, I only have 6 of these tapestries from the lotus here, 6 of them. There are 2 of them here, and I have 4 to dress the church with. Normally I would have, at the church I would have the other on the side here, of the gold here. And the 6th, and I put those lotus here because those lotus now represents the 7th voice, which is our unity. So we have all the way from before Africa to before Jesus Christ, all the way to the present, and now we have the 6th region, the gold, and now the other back to Egypt. Back to Egypt, Kemet now will represent our unity now. And Shekinah Job said that, and you must understand this, as we reach back, we must be very thankful for Napoleon, his army that rediscovered the Rosetta Stone. The ghost is out now, you people, you artists now, don't forget this. The ghost is out. Up until 1822, well, 1799 is when Napoleon's army rediscovered the Rosetta Stone. And a few years later, Jean-Francois Champollion, the Frenchman, deciphered in 1822 the hieroglyphics. And the hieroglyphics, which we know contains what we will find the Book of the Dead, the oldest religious text on earth, represents the spiritual verbalization of our ancient spirituality. And we were very thankful now that Jean-Francois Champollion in 1822 deciphered that ancient language. Now everyone can read, that we can read now the foundation of and the meaning of our African spirituality, which consists of Mayat. Mayat. That's the name given to our ancient African civilization, Mayat. When we get away from the Abrahamic religions of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, we get back to where we started out, Mayat. And Mayat consists, those are universal principles. And those 7 principles are truth, justice, righteousness, order, balance, harmony, and reciprocity. So Shekinah Job said that the renowned classic African Senegalese scholar Dr. Shekinah Job said, for us to return to Egypt, Kemet, in every domain is a necessary condition to reconcile African civilization with history. Egypt, Kemet, will play the same role in the thinking and renewing of African culture that ancient Greece and Rome plays in the culture of the West. So we as Africans in Africa and in the diaspora, we have to Sankofa our spirit back to, through that African Ma'afa, that African colonization, slavery, all of that. We have to go back through all of that, reach down there and pull out that meiotic, those 7 principles that rule, that govern the lives of our ancestors during the golden ages of Egypt. And we all will look back to Egypt. Now, why? Because Egypt, Ethiopia, and the Sudan, they make up the Nile Valley civilization. And the Nile Valley civilization is where the first human being came forth. That's where Lucy is. Everything came from us as black people, our DNA. We represent that melanin in our skin, represent the DNA, the mayat. And don't forget that. So we as African people, we have to reach back and look to Egypt. Why do we look to Egypt? Well, we know that Ethiopia is older than Egypt. Sudan on down in Uganda, the mouth of the Nile, which is the white and the blue Nile, that's where civilization started. But we look to Egypt because that's where we find the hieroglyphics. In the Western world, you have to have something written to show. Now we have our ancient language, the hieroglyphics, deciphered now, and we can Google it now and read all about Mayotte. We can read all about how the Europeans have fraudulently taken our spirituality and renamed it for their own. Yeah. So it's up to us as artists now to reach back, fetch it, and expose the lie.
That's right.
I think that's enough. Thank you. I do want to give you all, since there's so a few of us here, my main is as a cultural evangelist. Instead of me giving out the Bible, I give out a little thing called, how many of you heard of the Adinkra symbols from Ghana? How many of you heard of Sankofa?
Yes.
You must be aware of, I have a little bag there, that on the floor there, yes. You must be aware that in Ghana there are many, there are about 50 or 60 ancient philosophical symbols called the Adinkra symbols. And these, you can Google Adinkra symbols. And those of us who are in the Afrocentric spirit, like I'm a cultural evangelist, we try to share with you, our brothers and sisters, at least 2 of these symbols. One of these symbols is like that. Can you see it from here?
Jinyami.
Jinyami, which means God is first. The omnipotence and omnipresence of God. God is first. And the second symbol is the Adinkra symbol is called Sankofa. And Sankofa has 2 icons. Among all the philosophical symbols of Sankofa is the only one that has 2 icons. And I think you all familiar with the Valentine heart.
Right.
That was taken from the Adinkra symbols. The Western man, they took that symbol and made it the Valentine heart. But that's one of the icons. The second icon for Sankofa is a bird. It's a little copper bird with the feet going straight into the future, but the head is turned around, touching the back. And it means reach back and fetch what is needed and move on into the future. Reach back and fetch that part of you that was stolen and taken from you, and move into the future. Reach back and reach back to Mayotte and forget about the Abrahamic religion, but reach back and get it and move straight into the future. So I'm going to give each one of you a Sankofa as a gift.
Wow, thank you. So while she distributes that, just clap one more time for your energy.
Yes.